I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Kyla Martin, career coach and dream life strategist. She helps create the career and life that you imagine. This includes uncovering your career purpose while peacefully charting an action plan to pursue your flexible, freedom-based dream life. She believes that each of us already possess what we need to create the life of our dreams. She teaches you how to access it. Prior to creating her coaching practice, she spent 25 years in corporate America's top companies, helping others uncover their destiny. Today, she coaches, teaches, and speaks and writes from around the world, living the life that she imagined. During my interview with Kyla, she shares her journey of self-discovery from her corporate life to entrepreneurship. Learn from Kyla's life lessons on how to push past where you are stuck and achieve the life you desire. I hope you enjoy this interview with Kyla. Please share it with your friends and colleagues if there's something in this podcast that could help others as well. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm here with Kyla Martin. And Kyla, do you want to get started and just talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Amy. I love your podcast because Breaking Beliefs is probably the reason that I'm here. It's something that really was so much of the foundation of why I was living the life I was versus the life that I wanted, and many of which I wasn't even aware of. So excited to talk about that.
Well,
my
awesome.
business is Kyla Martin Coaching, and I coach primarily women to leave corporate America and pursue the career and life that they really want. And then I kind of accidentally created a whole second group of clients, which are entrepreneurs who want to continue to break down beliefs, work on their mindset, and continue to create the life and career that they want.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and looking forward to kind of diving into your story. So always like to start at the beginning and really kind of where did you grow up? What did your parents do? That sort of thing.
I grew up primarily in Texas. My parents are both from Texas, and I was born in Houston, and then we moved to Connecticut for about 5 years when I was younger, and then we settled outside of San Antonio, and that's where I graduated from high school and where my parents lived till I was in college.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And what did your parents do?
So my dad was a art major and then couldn't get a job and had a wife and wanted children. And so he went into the insurance brokerage business, so placing insurance for large corporations, and worked in that field. Well, he still works in that field, actually. He's about to turn 80, and he still has a couple clients. Yeah. He's tried to retire about 5 times, but it's not taken. And then my mother was mostly a stay-at-home mom. Both of my parents love antiques, and so they had a couple different antique shops when I was growing up. So my mom was a little bit of an entrepreneur, and I want to say she did that probably through the time I was in high school.
Well, great. So now, so your dad was an art major. What was his specialty? Do you know?
So he majored in graphic design, and then he loves oil painting. It's been really fun to watch him get back into that in retirement.
So he gave it up all through his career and just got back into it?
What's so interesting is whenever we had to do a school art project, I mean, he was always magical to work with. So when I was in 6th grade, I made a Trojan horse with him out of paper mache. And
oh, wow.
I remember I got an A++ on it. I didn't even know it was a grade.
So what did you see from him? Yeah, so what did you see from him as far as him changing careers like that? Did you ever see that he was disappointed he wasn't doing art, or how did you see that affect him?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I remember being probably in junior high and starting to, become passionate about different areas. And I said to him, if you were an art major, how did you end up, working for an insurance brokerage house? And so then he kind of told me the story. I couldn't get a job, and I was married, and we wanted to have kids. And so they were hiring, and then I kind of slowly became an expert in that field, and this is just kind of what you did. And I remember being, at the time, thinking, oh, okay, so you have something you're passionate about or a hobby, and you just kind of put that aside to financial security. And
right.
So that would come to be a belief that really informed my lens for, what career I chose, what major I chose, and of course not really even fully understanding I was doing this.
Right.
But it definitely didn't occur to me till way later that I could create a career in my passion, because I had to really clean up a lot of those beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were younger, what were the things that you loved to do?
I always loved dance. In fact, my parents were very supportive. My sister was a cheerleader, and she loved to do gymnastics, and I loved to dance. And so they turned this playroom we had in our upstairs into a dance studio and a sort of a gym, and put up bars and mirrors and some equipment for my sister. And so I always was really passionate about dance.
Yeah. And so how long did you do that for?
Actually, I have almost a minor in dance in college.
Oh, really?
I continued to do it in college. And in fact, I even performed with a dance company till my actually probably more like my late 20s.
Okay. So what was your major then?
I majored in journalism. And it's funny because looking back, I thought about majoring in psychology. And so the whispers were there for me, back then. I always loved personality tests. I was constantly, reading, like, What Color's Your Parachute? Books like that kind of helped you with vocation. But, again, here's another belief. One of my dad's closest friends majored in psychology and then couldn't get a job, much like him. And so a belief was created that, psychology doesn't produce a financially secure career, right? And then you add to that a dad who spent his whole career in insurance, and the whole lens was safety, security. You got to have insurance, right? You got to have a plan. And so that really did color a lot of the decisions that I made. And again, I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Yeah. So what was it about journalism that you went into? Because to me, journalism would be risky as well, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Writing always came really easy to me. I was really excelled in English, and I loved reading. And so I guess I thought you can always get a job at a newspaper. And I was listening to your last podcast with Kim, and I kind of had the same lens. where she thought, oh, those poor people, they may not get a job. Right? Said half of you. That's kind of how I thought. Like, oh, some of those poor people won't get a job, but I'll get a job. And I knew that I could go into marketing or advertising. I felt like there were so many fields that I could use a journalism degree. And I'd already had several articles published when I was in high school. And so I just thought that's a secure road to a job.
So where did you end up working out of college doing that?
And so what I found was that it wasn't a secure road.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got out of college, guns blazing, ready to take on the world. And this was early 90s, so not a terrible economy. And I had moved to Washington, D.C. I'd studied abroad in college, and I'd moved to D.C. with two of my roommates from London who were American. And we thought it'd be fun to live somewhere after college. And it was during an inaugural year. And so we thought D.C. would be fun. So we moved to D.C. and promptly none of us can get jobs. So I ended up temping for probably 6 months. And then I finally landed a job at the sister publication to Congressional Quarterly as a local government magazine called Governing. And mostly what I did was admin work. But I occasionally got to work on a few real projects. And so I quickly realized their security is just made up.
There's no such thing. So once you get into this and you kind of see what the world is, what kind of decisions were you making, or did you feel disappointment? Did you feel, what kind of shift or transition did you have to make?
Sure. Yeah. And I think back then I thought, I just need more education and then I can find success. So I decided to go back to grad school, and in the meantime moved back to Dallas and found a job as a marketing assistant, which again, I was still doing a lot of admin work. But again, I got to do some marketing, but I was working for a technology company, and they had an office in London. And I decided that I was going to get them to create a job for me in their London office, and I did. Because when you're 23, that's what you think. You're like, I'll just get them to create a job. And again, thinking about belief, I had a mother who taught me, you can try anything you want. You can do anything you want. You can be successful at anything. And so it was an interesting dichotomy with a dad who was trying to instill beliefs that would serve me, right? They were given to me with love and the best of intention. But it was this interesting dynamic between my parents, because it was sort of the security with the you can do anything you want and you should try all kinds of things. And so it was that part of me that thought, well, I'll just get them to create a job. I don't want to move to London without a job. That's kind of my dad talking, right? And my mom goes, of course you can try this. So I got them to create a job for me in London, and I moved to their London office.
Wow.
And meanwhile, I had worked for them to finish grad school. So by the time I moved, I finished grad school.
And what was your graduate degree?
Yeah, so I just loved school. As I said, I loved books and reading growing up. And so I found a program that it was very self-directed. It was basically a master's in liberal arts. And so I got to choose all kinds of different classes. I chose a lot in communications and psychology. So again, that interest in what makes people tick and what motivates humans always really fascinated me. And so it was a way to continue learning, but then I think also create a belief that, if I have a master's, then I can take on the world.
Right. So it's so interesting, right? Like we have this pull inside of us that keeps drawing us, we can keep fighting it, but it keeps drawing us, back in some way. I had listened a long time ago to an interview with Brene Brown on a podcast, but she had told her daughter she wasn't allowed to pick a degree her first year. She had to take just any class that interested her, period. And she wasn't allowed to talk about degrees or like what it was going to be. And, it was the first time I'd ever kind of thought about that premise. But we go in already feeling like we have to make this decision, and sometimes we're going against our gut, our intuition, right? And then we're trying to make it fit.
Absolutely. And quiet the whispers, right? I mean, they're there all along, but we kind of push them down. And when I started looking back at my life, I realized that the whispers had been there all along. I even had a friend who I'd known since, I don't know, 6th grade. And when she found out I was coaching, she was like, of course that's what you're doing. I did that back in middle school. I'm like, well, I wish you would have.
Could you given me a clue sooner? Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and the other part that's interesting is your mom. So did she ever mention that she thought, like, your dad shouldn't have given up art?
Yeah, I think there was always part of her that was sad. And
yeah.
But, I think they both came from very blue-collar families. And I think to some degree, she had some of the same belief that, that was, can make a living at it. So we should kind of do that on the side. And she too wanted a family and, a house and the American dream.
Yeah.
And so, but over the years, she's really encouraged him to get back into it. And it's been really exciting to watch that come out. And like I said, it came out in different ways when we were growing up, through art projects, or they always love, to this day, they love to dress up, for Halloween or costume parties. And so he would make part of their costumes, and so he kind of found some outlets.
Found ways to have it as hobbies. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's been great to see him embrace it again later in life. And, now he's very serious about it.
Yeah. So with your mom, being a stay-at-home mom, what was her push as far as you going in a different direction? So it's interesting how she was giving you the confidence to do it and not necessarily telling you to go down the same path as her. What do you think created that?
Yeah, so my mother said she had this sort of revelation in her 30s, and she started reading books by like Zig Ziglar and kind of trying to find her own voice. She's the youngest of 4, and was always, you're the little sister. What you say is not important. And so I think for her, it was finding her voice, and, personal development books and retreats really helped her do that. She also became really involved in Girl Scouts, starting in high school, which I think was very empowering for her. She eventually became not just a leader, but a trainer for Girl Scouts. And so I think that instilled a lot of confidence that she gave to us. But I also think she didn't have a lot of choices, when she went to college. The options were you can be a nurse, a secretary, or a teacher. And so she definitely wanted to break the cycle with us. And I think that's definitely where you can be anything you want, came from. You can try anything you want. And you can, test out things. You don't have to commit to something for the rest of your life. There were several things that I thought I was interested in high school, and so she would always encourage me to go get an internship in that, see if you really like it. And so I did a lot of internships and quickly found out, no, those aren't things I'm interested in. But the psychology was never sort of one of the options. And I think it's partly because they didn't understand a clear path. That wasn't in their lens.
Right. It's not what they knew. Yeah.
So it was kind of a more traditional vocation. So.
Yeah, and that's where it's so important when you find people to follow or, outside your norm, because that's why so many people, in the CPA industry, so many times when you ask, like, why did you become a CPA? My father was a CPA, my grandfather was a CPA in my case, and my mom was an art teacher, but she wanted me to go down the path her father had, not what she had. And, doctors become doctors and things like that, because that's what you're used to. You're used to the life. It's very normal for you. So it's how you go and seek and find, what's going to align with you. So at what point in your career did you start feeling out of alignment? So you moved to London.
I moved to London, which was a ball. I always viewed work as work. And, if you could find something that you were good at and you somewhat enjoyed, there was definitely beliefs around that's just work, So I would say I started feeling out of alignment pretty early into my career. And I quickly moved into internal communications and speech writing, because there's a great intersection between communication and psychology. So again, I was being drawn into what makes people tick, and how can you talk to employees on behalf of an executive, and how can you coach an executive to be their more authentic self. And none of this was conscious when I was doing it, but looking back, I kind of see I kept created these pathways that allowed me to move more into the areas that I really was passionate about. And then it's probably my mid-30s, my sister one day said, I know you're not thrilled in your career. Have you ever thought about being a coach? And I was like, no. I'm really good at what I do. At that time I was writing for Michael Dell. I was like, I've hit the pinnacle. Why would I start over, quote unquote, go back to school potentially? And, but she saw exactly what my path was supposed to be, sort of like the friend from 6th grade, right? She saw something in me that made me a good fit to encourage others, and my passion for understanding the brain and, how we can kind of hack our brains to get to our higher self and be more of who we are. All of those whispers were there. But it really wasn't until 9/11 that I really had a major epiphany. I remember being in my apartment and being scared to death like everyone else, watching the news, and I went to get something out of my fridge, and I caught sight of a magnet that the famous quote by Thoreau, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you imagined. And I thought, the reason I'm so scared right now is because I'm facing my mortality, and I'm not living the life that I want.
Right.
But I just went back to corporate America for 10 years, continued to think, if I just find the right company, if I just find the right manager, if I just find the right executive, then I'll be happy. And so for me, the final pinnacle moment, which unfortunately it always takes something dramatic to wake us humans up, I went to a conference with my now husband, then boyfriend, and you were supposed to leave by the end of the weekend with sort of a mission statement for your life. And they did. It was a really magical approach. They used a lot of Strength Finder philosophy, that personality inventory, and they used spiritual strengths, and you kind of did this uncovering throughout the whole weekend. And by the end, my statement was so crystal clear, I could not ignore it anymore. And my then boyfriend, now husband, had a similar awakening. And so we both said we've got to start moving in this direction. And so that's when I started creating a kind of some outcomes for my business and my life, and then continued studying, brain psychology, and quickly realized But what stops us is that we stand where we are and try to create a plan and work toward it versus sort of Stephen Covey style, start with the end. And we start with the end and reverse engineer, then our highest brain stays turned on and our lower brain that says, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? Go back to the sofa with the snack food. Will be quieted. And so your higher brain gives you a plan, and then you can execute from where you're standing, but you'll already have a lot of the answers, a lot of the milestones. And so that was really what made the difference. And why so many times before I had these goals and passions and interests, but I would always stop myself. The fear became paralyzing, and I couldn't figure out
what was the fear.
Belief system. It was twofold, which I find with most of my clients nowadays. I don't know how to do this. I know how to do what I'm doing right now, and then I don't know how to create financial security for that. And so that is really, once I figured it out for myself, then I created a process that I now use with my clients because I've been that person. And I think so many entrepreneurs were trying to solve our own problems. And that was definitely a belief that once I realized, for example, that entrepreneurs weren't necessarily born, most of them were made. And the way that they were made was trying to solve their own problems. Then I realized, well, I can be that person too. You know, I don't have to have come from a family of entrepreneurs. I don't have to know how to get from A to Z. I just need to create an outcome and start to create some milestones and figure out how to go.
Right. So you said at the retreat you created a statement that was crystal clear. What was that statement?
Yeah, I mean, it basically said, I exist to support and encourage women to uncover and activate their dream career. And that's not what I do.
Yeah.
Wild.
So how did that, yeah, well, it's pretty cool, right? To look back and say you're living. Yeah. So you pictured the end. What types of things, to take the risk or to take the leap from having a financially secure job, starting out in something completely new? It's a new career, it's a new business.
Absolutely.
What kind of things were key for you in kind of moving from the belief system of financial security to belief in yourself, basically, that you can do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I'm a big believer in building bridges. Our brains, if they have bridges, don't want to explode as much as they will say, I'm going to jump off the cliff, right?
Right.
So for me, I started creating some consulting business first, and those were wholesale engagements, for 20 hours a week, for, indefinitely. And so that created some financial security. And then it also kept me very closely connected to my prospects, my coaching prospects, right? Because so many of my clients are people in corporate America who want to leave but don't know how or scared. And so it kept me very connected to them, which was really important to keep kind of seeing what their pain points were and how I could help them overcome those. And then since I had some financial security with the consulting, then I could continue to take some risks as I built out the coaching practice. And I didn't need a full slate of clients in the beginning because I had consulting money coming in. So for me, that let my brain calm down a little bit and continue to take risk, with coaching and networking and putting myself out there authentically and telling more of my story and knowing that there was still consulting business, coming in. And of course, the consulting business then led to coaching clients. And, I incorporated so much of the lens I was using in my coaching, in my consulting. I felt finally confident and empowered enough to do that. Whereas I think when I worked in corporate America, I hid a lot of that because it didn't fit in the box of what I was supposed to be doing.
So when did you feel like you got this?
I think the pivotal moment was when I wasn't looking for full-time jobs anymore. Because when you're like, I got consulting business, building my coaching clients, but I still had some job alerts turned on.
Right.
And then one day I thought, what am I doing? That's not what I'm doing anymore. So why am I putting that into my lens? Why am I giving it any energy? And so I think it was the day that I turned off the full-time alert that I finally realized this is what I'm doing, and I can't go back.
Right. I think what you're talking about is so important. Where some people might start with side hustles or whatever, but it isn't jumping off the cliff with a business. You do need to test it, make sure that you know where you're going to have money to fund the other, initiatives and how much of a risk it is. I've always talked about entrepreneurship as it's kind of like gambling sometimes, because you think, oh, tomorrow's going to be the big hit, or, and so forth. So if tomorrow's not the big hit, how are you going to fund each thing that you're doing, and what are you willing to risk versus what do you want to make sure is a constant? And those are really important decisions as you're moving through the business. And when do you call it quits on certain initiatives that don't seem to be going the way that you had hoped?
Absolutely. It is. And there's no school for this, right? I mean, there's not.
No.
It's gut. You can get an MBA in entrepreneurship. I mean, so there's a lot of this you just figure out as you go, and you listen to your gut, and you pursue things that you are passionate about. I mean, I tell my clients all the time, you want to be really clear about which things you want to even focus on, because that's why we created our own business, right? And it's easy to go after secure whatever, a contractor. This kind of business is always secure, whatever we tell ourselves, right? In the beginning, I thought, I want to coach executives because that's what I spent my whole career doing. But that's not what I want to do. I want to help people do what I'm doing, right? But it's so appealing, right? Because there's so much business to coach and speechwrite for executives. It's a very lucrative underworld, and there's not enough people who do it. But I quickly realized that's not why I have my own business. I have a passion for helping my avatar, which is me, for most of us, our avatar. Right? The version of us years ago.
It's a really important point of, and that's something that I've had to be cautious of in my business as well, is there's some work that's easy to get, but if you take that work, it will take away from the time of the things you want to be doing, which is hard because it's money, so to say no is hard. But you really have to be, very clear on your business plan. And, if you have to go back to that, you do, but that, saying no is okay, so that you have the space for the things that you want to be doing. And you give it the time that you need to see if it will be successful, as well, as long as you can fund it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I had a coach say to me a couple of years ago, you're sort of blocking the space by taking these other things, and then you don't have the space or the flow, right, to bring in the actual avatar.
Yeah, which can be disappointing. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it's such a great, and so many people, grew up the same way with very, and I did too, about making sure you chose a secure job. And, we have those things as we go through our life, but as you start getting more life lessons, is learning about how to trust yourself. And if you're passionate about something, you'll most likely make a success out of it, as long as you have good business support on the other end, if that's not your forte. But, passion will lead to success, whether that's in a corporate job or as an entrepreneur. But when you try to fit yourself somewhere else, something always feels off, and you don't really get that till later.
Yeah, I always think about acquired state versus natural state, right? And so the bigger the gap, the more exhausted you are, right? And if you can close that gap between your natural state and you don't have to do much of your acquired state, then you can be in that flow so much more.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I like to close the interview with just some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Spiritual.
Okay, great. That's one that I don't get a lot. Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want as far as spirit.
So I think, we just moved out to the 26 acres we bought on a lake, and that's where I feel most spiritually connected is when I'm in nature. And so I was thinking a lot about what that has brought me spiritually, and then still what I want to be intentional about doing. And so, I'm sorry, the first question was, what do I...
That you don't have that you want.
That I don't have, that I want, yes. So I've gotten a little taste of that spiritual connection on our land. We've only lived out there about 6 weeks, but I want more of that. And so being intentional about spending more time in nature and actually having that as some time block to be lying in the hammock and, just literally listening to birds or listening to the water lapping at the shore and just being, again, more intentional about creating that connection.
Space, yeah. Okay, things or actions I do have that I want.
My husband and I are really good about taking walks on our land together, and we always feel so grounded at the end of the day, being sort of physically connected to the earth. And, just kind of seeing, oh, there's a branch that fell or the leaves are changing, and just being very aware of all the things we miss living in the city, even though a lot of those were there, but we weren't connected to them. So that is definitely a practice that I want to continue, and it's a great way for us to be connected to each other and with the nature. And again, he feels very connected spiritually in nature as well. So it's a great trifecta.
That's nice. That's nice. You have that. Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want.
It's interesting. When we moved, I thought that I would want to go back and forth to the city a lot more. In fact, we even kind of talked about, should we get an apartment? And now I've realized I don't have that and I don't want that. And that's been a surprise. The peace that we've gained from being out there has been wonderful. And so something
worth
I
it.
want to, stay in.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, last one. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
I think spiritually, like so much of our life, we're on autopilot. And so much of our actions are just repeating, thoughts are repeating things that we've been doing. I think being open to the spiritual practice that I had before, some of them I want to sort of peacefully release, and that's okay. It's going to be sort of a new birth of my next spiritual journey. And whether that's, we are not kind of in the groups we were in spiritually in our previous life, maybe spirituality kind of takes on a more holistic dimension. I think just kind of letting some of that go.
Yeah, awesome. So is there anything that you want to make sure people take away from the conversation that we haven't covered today?
As I said at the top of the hour, I'm just such a passionate believer in identifying and understanding your beliefs. And so I just encourage your listeners to kind of look at what's the next step they want to take and what do they believe about it, right? Because it's probably something that's left over. It's probably something that they don't really even actually believe anymore. And so starting to kind of take those out of our brain and put them on a table and look at them, decide what serves you, what doesn't, that has literally been the game changer in my life. And that's why I'm so excited to have this podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you so much for being on. This has been great and so aligned as well. So I'm glad people will find out about you too, for people that are on this journey. So thanks again for being on.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
And now for my mindful moments on my interview with Kyla Martin, that started out talking about her upbringing with her dad being an art major and moving into the insurance brokerage business. and her mom being a stay-at-home mom, and how both of their experiences and life lessons helped her in really charting her path in her career and the messages that it brought her. And sometimes we don't even realize when we start living out other people's beliefs and that it gets in our way of finding our own passions. So it was a very interesting discussion about her understanding of her father giving up being an artist to go into the insurance brokerage business because that was a safer, more secure career. And that message that was embedded in her system as a belief system that actually was getting in the way of things that she was choosing as a young adult and in her career, because again, she was very focused on that security. And I think oftentimes we have these beliefs that we don't even know where they come from. And we need to step back sometimes and think about, are they my beliefs or are they somebody else's beliefs? And when we feel out of alignment, that's our intuition of taking that internal look, observation at our gut, how we're feeling. And when we feel off, we normally know that we feel off, but we might push past it. We might push it down because it doesn't align to an inherent belief. And those are the things, when we observe them, that creates the pause, if we choose to actually observe why we're feeling off and try to understand maybe the beliefs that are driving us in a certain direction that don't align with how our body feels. And it was a really important point to that when she talked about not quieting the whispers, that often in our life, when we step back, or maybe when you close your eyes and you're thinking about this for yourself, there are whispers that are happening in your body that when you're quiet, maybe sitting in a car, on a plane, in your bed at night, that there are thoughts or feelings that come up that we often push down for many reasons. Maybe they're just not accessible at this point in our lives, and we know that we're waiting on certain things, or that we have the fear of the unknown. And that fear of the unknown actually drives us to stay status quo and doesn't allow us to actually explore why we might be feeling the way that we did. And she really talked about a journey of how many pivots she made in her career, but still was trying to stay safe and not coming back to what her true love was of psychology and how you use that in order to help others. And so everything happens in the right time in our lives. We should never look back and say, well, I should have done this in my 20s, or I should have done this in my 30s, or so forth. Whatever moment that we make those observations is the right time in our life. But our job is to not ignore the whisper. It is to actually create what we want to create in our lives, but do it in a safe way. Make sure that we have put our goals together, that we understand how much we're willing to gamble and risk in order to achieve those dreams. And sometimes it's everything, and sometimes it's 10%. But getting ourselves comfortable on what that is can help us of what Kyla talked about, building bridges versus jumping off the cliff with our eyes closed, right? This will help us in making sure that we are understanding those pivotal moments that happen in our lives, the messages that they're sending to us, and be able to start closing the gap on where we might be feeling off in our bodies and our lives. And understand that our belief systems are not always ours. And when we do the work to actually observe, it can help us in moving forward into the life that we desire. Now, what you'll see in the podcasts that are coming up on Thursdays is our B3 Basic. And these are the types of practices that we can implement 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, where we can start doing some of this work, this practice, these observations in our life to make little shifts in our energy, to find where those openings are and expose them and see what we can do and what's possible versus putting up fear and blocking ourselves along the way. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.